So today I'm going to be talking about something a little bit more personal, but equally something that almost all academics experience at one point in their careers. Years ago, when I began my PhD back in 2017, I initially struggled quite a bit. You see, most people go undergrad, master's, PhD, but I skipped a step. I went straight from undergrad into the PhD. You know, most people who are going from master's to PhD, they hit the ground running, but that wasn't the case for me. See, back when I was an undergrad, I was used to getting good exam scores. Part of my identity that I had created for myself was that I was an intelligent and high-achieving student. However, a PhD, as many people will tell you, is a different animal altogether, and I immediately found myself not performing as well as I expected. And that was quite painful in terms of my self-perception. Now, the way I dealt with this was similar to that old horse from Animal Farm. I just told myself, I must work harder. So I did. And yes, I started to see positive changes at work, but I also started to see negative ones outside of work. You see, I was working evenings and weekends. The little time I wasn't physically at work, I was still there mentally. I would often zone out of conversations, and most of what I talked about was work. And looking back, it's actually quite embarrassing, and I feel quite bad for my friends, family, for my wife, having to listen to repeated conversations about issues in virology or immunology, things they had no interest in. Now, more subtly, what was happening over time was I was gradually withdrawing from my hobbies. Things I used to enjoy, like playing football, playing the guitar, reading, and playing golf. Now, the wake-up moment came when someone very close to me passed away. And I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but it gave me a real jolt. And it felt like a bucket of water, ice cold water being poured over my head, because I suddenly woke up and I realized that I had had all of these opportunities to spend time with that person, but I'd turned them all down for work-related reasons. And now those opportunities were gone. There would be no more conversations with them, and I had to bear the responsibility for that because that was how I had allocated my time. So this led me into a period of deep reflection and contemplation. One of the positives about this time in my life was I actually rediscovered my love of reading again. And by doing so, I encountered several authors, including Joshua Fields Millburn and Ryan Nicodemus, together known as the Minimalists. And their writing really resonated with what I was feeling inside at that point in my life. I felt that I had been living to work instead of working to live. And what did I have to show for it? My family had gotten used to seeing me every few months, even though they only live a 10-minute drive away. My girlfriend, who's now my wife, she was expressing that she was starting to feel some distance between us. We no longer were spending quality time together. But hey, at least I was doing well at work, right? Well, here's the thing about academia, and I'm sure this is similar in other fields of work as well. There's always more work to do. You're never going to run out of work, so there's really no point in sprinting at a ridiculous pace, spinning your wheels. One piece of advice I got about doing a PhD that I ignored, that I wish every potential PhD student out there could hear and take on board, is that a PhD is a marathon, not a sprint. So how did I get out of this situation? Well, the first thing is that I had to change my mindset, and for most people out there going through the same thing, this is the first step. It's also the hardest because you need to change how you conceptualize your own identity. Most people out there, their identity is so wrapped up in what they do for a living that makes all these other changes quite difficult. They identify with being that really hard-working employee, but there's more to you than what you do for a living. Once I had that down, I began to structure my day and treat my work a little bit differently. I would wake up at 5 a.m. and I would write for at least 1 hour every morning. And once that period was over, I told myself, okay, that's all the writing done for today. And I still keep up that habit to this day. I quite enjoy writing. I would then go to work and I would start to organize my time more efficiently. Instead of performing experiments one after each other, now I would stack them on top of each other so that I could get home a little bit earlier. And I even adopted a kind of uniform, so to speak. This was actually incredibly helpful. So I'm not talking about something like a school uniform. What I mean is I selected particular outfits that became work outfits, not something I would wear around the house. And what happened was then when I would get home, the first thing I would do was completely change from my work outfit to my home outfit. And the reason I think this is so important for a lot of people nowadays is because of remote work, the line between work and personal life, it's not even blurred anymore, it's just been completely erased. So you need to artificially introduce that line, that border once again. And one of the best ways I found of doing that was having work outfits and home outfits. Gradually over time, I started to pick up my hobbies again, start playing my guitar again, and only recently I've decided to get back into golf, which I'm particularly excited about. But reading was probably my favorite one that I got back into. And over time, I started to notice that I was influencing my colleagues and friends in positive ways as well. You see, as a lab group, we were used to eating our lunch at our desks, okay, working the whole way through lunch on our computers. And what I started to do was I would take my lunch to the local park, 15-minute walk away. I would bring a book with me and I would read there. So I would spend my lunchtime in the park, surrounded by nature, reading a book that I was enjoying and eating nice food. And I can't express what an important step that was. You know, it might seem obvious to you, but so many people work through their lunch now. And if you do that, if you work at your desk during your lunch period, even if you're eating a lunch, you turn the working day into one long slog instead of two sort of bursts separated by a really nice, enjoyable lunchtime. And what I noticed over time was that other people that I knew at work, other colleagues, started to do the same thing. I started bumping into my colleagues out on walks and I would ask them, you know, what are you guys doing out there? And they would say, oh, well, we noticed you were always disappearing and going for walks at lunch. We thought we'd try it as well, and we're really enjoying it. And eventually we started to go for walks as a group at lunch. And eventually we got the entire lab group away from working at their desks at lunch. And we would actually go to a separate room, sit and have our lunch together and talk about things outside of work. It's a really lovely experience. And people, they improved. Their sort of mood throughout the day definitely improved. Now, in my opinion, you can actually detect and recognize which people have adopted this more mature attitude towards work. I've seen it in my colleagues and close friends, people who've grinded away for someone else for years, for a company or an institution, only to then experience firsthand that the company is never willing to reciprocate. You see, your colleagues might appreciate you working overtime, but an organization is cold, unfeeling. I have experienced friends of mine, close friends and colleagues, who banked up annual leave for years, only to be told that once they got seriously ill and got a bad health diagnosis, that it wasn't company policy to use their annual leave anymore. I've seen people who did the work of 2 jobs for 1 salary during times when their company was going through difficulties. And they were promised that, you know, when things go back to normal, you'll get that promotion, don't worry. 1 year later, things go back to normal, and now they're being told, yeah, that promotion, can't help you with that, sorry about that. The more mature heads among us recognize that work is a role we fulfill in exchange for money. It's not our entire identity, nor should it be. This perspective is sometimes referred to as quiet quitting, and I really hate that term because in my opinion, it's just a corporate propaganda word built to guilt you into going above and beyond at work. It's no different than companies who say things like, you know, we're a family here. Usually when I hear that out loud, or if I see it written in a job description, I run a mile, because what it tells me is there's some sort of war crimes being committed in that building. So folks, let me know down in the comments below. I want to hear from you. Have you had experiences like this before? Do the things I'm saying here resonate with you at all? Really looking forward to chatting with you down in the comments section. And this leads me to my final thought that I'll leave you with. In my opinion, your work should be the least interesting thing about you. You know, how many times do you meet someone at an event and the first thing you ask after learning their name is, so, Dean, what do you do? What do you do for a living? A much more interesting thing to ask is this: what are you passionate about? I bet you 9 times out of 10, if you ask that, you will end up in a more interesting conversation. And very few people will answer that question by talking about their work. So folks, if you found this helpful, maybe you're in academia currently and you're struggling with that work-life balance right now, just know that you're not alone. If you want more helpful advice and reflection pieces like this, consider subscribing to today's video and to the channel. Remember, work is important, but it's not everything. Thank you for watching.